You're listening to the Immortal Icons of Dance podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Johnson. This is a very special Christmas episode of the podcast. My gift to you all is an hour-long conversation on George Balanchine's Nutcracker as it's performed at the New York City Ballet, which is celebrating its 70th anniversary this year. I sat down with Jean-Pierre Frohlich this Nutcracker season between rehearsals and performances to talk about his 6 decades of involvement with this production. As a student at the School of American Ballet, and then as a company member, he danced nearly every male role in the show, from Little Fritz to the Sugar Plums Cavalier. Since 1990, he's been a ballet master and repertory director for the company, teaching and coaching generations of dancers in the roles he once performed, making sure the same standard of excellence is maintained as when Balanchine was at the helm of the company. We talk about his fond memories from the studio and on stage, some of the technical considerations when rehearsing such a big production, and the delicate balance that must be maintained between tradition and adaptation. I hope you enjoy this conversation. All right, today on the podcast, we're welcoming Jean-Pierre Frohlich, who is currently the Senior Repertory Director at the New York City Ballet. And he's going to talk to us about his extensive history with George Balanchine's The Nutcracker today. So welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Could you start by telling us how you came to be a student at SAB?
Well, I became a student. My parents are in the arts. My father was a violinist and my mother was a pianist, came from Europe a couple of years after World War II. And my sister, my eldest sister, she was at SAB, and she was a Nutcracker, and then she was also an original, she wasn't a bug. There used to be insects and cherubs in the original Midsummer Night's Dream. So she was in that production when it first premiered at City Center. And I would watch the company, and then my Nadine, who's my older sister, she left SAB to work with Alexandra Danilova, because Alexandra Danilova was teaching at Carnegie Hall before she came on the staff of SAB. And Diana Adams, who was the chairman of the faculty at the time, I don't know if that's what the title was at that time, but she asked my father, you have a son, would he be interested in dance? And my father was all for it. My mother was a little hesitant, but I had a lot of energy and I was into sports at that age, and I was 10 years old. So I auditioned. Tunkovsky was in the room, and so was Diana Adams. And I did not get accepted. I did not get a scholarship because that's what my parents were looking for, because they said I would never dance. I had a very tight body, and Tunkovsky lifted my leg, and it didn't go up very high, but I have very narrow hips. And he said he probably will not dance. He doesn't have the flexibility, but if you want to pay for him to take lessons, it's fine. So that's how I got into SAB. So my parents, who did not have very much money, due to coming from Europe and starting all over again, sacrificed for me to go to SAB. Mm-hmm. And then after 3 years, I eventually got a scholarship because they realized he's improving. And then many years later, after I got in the company, one of the executives of the school, Natasha Molo, who was one of the 3 Russians that were very close with Balanchine when some from the Ballet Russe days and when he was in Russia, or friends he knew, said to my mother, he fooled us, because they didn't expect me to actually do what I'm doing, as well, and be successful at it.
Yeah. Here, let me record. There we go. So once it came time for Nutcracker, did you need to audition, or was it automatic because there were so few boys? It
was automatic because there were so few boys. I think Balanchine came in, and there was Jose Greco's son was at the school at the time, famous, well-known Spanish flamenco dancer. He was my prince, and I was Fritz. my first year in 1964.
Mm-hmm.
And my alternate was a girl, because they didn't have enough boys
really?
at the time, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
No auditions. They didn't have very many boys, so they just I got picked without even.
Mm-hmm. Was Nutcracker your first time on stage?
Yes,
mm-hmm.
And I loved it.
What do you remember about that first year performing?
Oh, I remember during the party scene rehearsals at City Center, going to City Center, and those studios weren't as nice as they are now. Not that they weren't nicer, they were more. The light was dimmer. They were more in wood. And I remember rehearsing with Francia Russell and Una Kai, who were rehearsing the children at the time. And I just loved it. I loved not the attention. I just loved being around that kind of atmosphere, mm-hmm. And knowing dance just by hearing about it at home. My parents playing classical music, my sister going to the school first, and then later on, like I said, to Alexandra Danilova's studio, and then eventually she went to the Hawkins, and she was an original trainee at the Hawkins house. So I was around dance and music all my life, so it just made sense to me, and I wasn't really an amazing student at school. I didn't have that kind of capacity to retain
mm-hmm.
Things. So I just went into dance full time.
Yeah.
But did not take it seriously until I was about 14, really seriously,
mm-hmm.
realizing, okay, this is something I want to do, really want to do.
Mm-hmm. So the character Fritz is a bit mischievous.
Mm-hmm.
You were a little bit mischievous that first year too.
Oh yeah, I used to get kicked out of schools, out of class at NYCB quite often.
Oh really?
Yeah. I would always get myself in trouble for some reason. I never thought I felt like I was the victim, but whatever. One day I remember, I don't know, I thought that Tumkowski would never catch it. There was a girl ready to do a jump from the corner, or a chassé step, and I put my foot underneath. So she landed on it and she tripped. And Tumkowski said, "Out." So there were many times I got kicked out. Yeah.
Will you tell the story about during performance, your little escape?
I will say, in those days, they did not have what they have now. They have supervisors mm-hmm. for the children. In my days, it was really your parents came into the theater. My parents came into the dressing room with me. They left eventually, and then Ducky, the head wardrobe master of the company, Ducky Copeland, he took care of the young gentlemen, the Prince and the Fritz, and make sure they got into the costumes, and brought us downstairs to the stage level. But my first wild experience was towards the beginning of the run. Since there wasn't any supervisors, I just, I kind of was very independent child. I used to like to take long walks on Broadway because I'm a New Yorker, and I'm Upper West Side, and in the rain, I used to love walking in the rain, and just for myself. I used to take the crosstown bus on 79th Street when I used to go to school when I was younger, but then I stopped with the Lycée Français, so I went there for 3 years, and then I went to public school afterwards. But I was very independent, so I decided one day to go out in the audience during the end of the party scene and watch the whole rest of the act, and then in intermission, the lights went on, and people noticed that I was the one that was on stage. These young children would come and ask me for autographs, and I would do that, and they would talk to me. And I would sit right on the edge of where the musicians are, and I'm like sitting on that ledge, mm-hmm. which is right in front of the first row of the orchestra, watching the second act. And beknownst to me, they were looking for me all over the theater, because you hear horror stories, little children alone in the hallways. And I mean, they weren't really, in those days, people weren't investigate it as much, you know. So anyway, short story. Someone in Spanish saw me and told the stage manager, and someone came out of the stage door, took me and brought me upstairs. And Ducky was really upset with me. I got very nervous, and I went home, you know, afterwards, and I couldn't sleep very well because I really felt, you know, maybe I won't be doing Nutcracker anymore after that. Nowadays, you probably would not do Nutcracker after that. But in those days, they actually needed boys. So
right.
There you go.
Yeah. So then, was it the next year or a few years later that you became the prince?
The following year. I became prince, and I danced prince for 3 years.
Oh, wow, 3 years.
Yeah.
Now, who taught you the role? Did Mr. B coach you after someone else had taught it to you?
I kind of basically knew it a little bit, but it was still, Unakai was still there, and Francia Russell was still there. So they taught it to me. Balanchine coached me in it. He was really wonderful with kids. He took a big interest in the party scene. To him, that was extremely important. He would like show and American dancers how to be elegant. And it's a bourgeois family that this takes place in this party scene. So there's a way of walking, the way you present yourself. And he was very, very much into coaching all that and coaching the kids, children. And he was extremely, I know you've probably heard this many times, he was really kind to kids. Maybe he saw himself from when he was very young.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, 3 years. Danced one season. I think it was my first season doing Prince. The Prince that was the A cast got a Broadway show, so he left. So I did every performance.
Oh, wow.
So I did it with, in those days it was A and B. Now I think it's red and green. My days, I never thought A or B was more important. B was less important than A, but I think some parents felt that. B's a lower mark in school. I just thought it was, you know, A cast is, so you know the difference between A and B.
Yeah.
Common sense to me, but that's why it's changed now. And I had Judy Fugate. I can't remember some of the other ones I had, but I remember Judy.
Some of your Maries, you're saying?
Yeah, some of my Maries. But I remember Judy one time. Didn't normally do it with her, and one day the Prince was sick, and I came out with the bed scene, and I came out after the battle scene with my half Nutcracker suit on. It got thrown off. I had the crown. I didn't put the crown on very well, and it fell. And I felt terrible. I felt very terrible because there's this, you know, it was a different texture of hair, so it was I had to go in a different place. The comb had to go in a certain area. But I really I lived for that time of year when I was in school. I couldn't wait. And then there was the other experience with finally having the black shoes, the transition to the ballet slippers, white slippers in the second act, to the patent leather shoes in the second act. One day I was backstage and Mr. Balanchine called me over and called over a dancer, a quarter ballet dancer, Margie Bressler, and asked her to take her shoes off and asked me to try them on, walk around. He asked if they fit, and I said they're a little big. So they put some tissues in the toes. And he said, can you do the second act with those on? And I understand now, because when you see that beautiful costume, and then you see white ballet shoes, there's something missing. And you go to a museum and you see these paintings of all these young princes or young kings. They always have their white, you know, knickers or whatever, but they always have these very elegant shoes.
Yeah.
And it kind of finishes the costume for me.
Yeah.
Now when I look at it.
Yeah, I agree.
And then Miss Balanchine obviously must have liked it, and we went to Capicio's, and they had a shoe made like that in stock.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went to Capicio's and I tried a pair on, and then the next day I was wearing them.
Mm-hmm.
And it stayed.
Mm-hmm. Just to clarify, because I know you're talking to me and I know the kind of context of the story, but for the listeners, that the prince used to just wear the white ballet slippers in
Yes,
Act 2.
the white ballet shoes that he wears in the battle scene,
Mm-hmm.
because when he becomes a Nutcracker, he has black ballet slippers for the party scene, so they look like shoes
Mm-hmm.
with his costume, and then they change to the white shoes
Mm-hmm.
for the battle scene, into the snow scene, and it goes on to the second act.
Mm-hmm. Could you tell me, actually, let me start here. So as some listeners may know, Balanchine danced in the original Nutcracker production in St. Petersburg, Russia, choreographed by Lev Ivanov after Petipa. And he based many elements of his own Nutcracker production on what he remembered from being a student at the school. In Act 2, the little prince tells everyone in the land of sweets the story of the magical events that took place at the end of Act 1. And he explains the battle between the mice and the toy soldiers and how he fought the Mouse King, and with Marie's help, how he defeated the Mouse King. And all of this is told through pantomime, which are a set of gestures used to explain narrative in ballet. In City Ballet's production, Balanchine recreated the original pantomime from Russia. So could you talk about the significance of the pantomime and, when you work with princes today, what are things that you focus on?
I tell them to talk to themselves when they do it. Really say the words of what your gestures mean.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you say you and you listen, and I will tell you everything. So it's very important for them to talk it
mm-hmm.
when they do it, and be very, very clear on what you're doing. The hardest part for everybody is to take the shoulder and move it, because it's the left hand. It's a lot easier to do it with the right hand because it's an awkward moment. But I just tell the dancers, the young dancers, the princes, just to be very clear and not rush anything, even though you have to be on the music.
Mm-hmm.
Just remember, you're telling them your experience, what happened before you got here.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Balanchine was very clear on the way he would want it to be done. I mean, obviously it must be from his memory as a child.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to tell you, who told me this story? Someone told me the story that many years ago, before Balanchine created the Nutcracker, that he was very friendly with the Christensen brothers.
Mm. And
Danilova and Balanchine would tell them this whole scenario of the ballet, what was happening when they were young in Russia. And San Francisco Ballet was the first Nutcracker in America, and it's very similar
mm-hmm.
to what Balanchine told Lou Christensen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just interesting that Lou took what Balanchine had to say and put it in his version. But everyone can. I don't know if everybody, but I think the people that doesn't know anything much about ballet history thinks Balanchine was the first.
Mm-hmm.
But Balanchine is the one that's the most popular.
Yeah.
Basically, it's in New York, and it's. I mean, nowadays everyone has a Nutcracker, even regional companies, and people flock to it. But the production of Balanchines, to me, it's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It really. I mean, the children relate to it because they see themselves on stage.
Mm-hmm. That's
why you have a lot of children that want to become dancers. You have many roles for the kids. And it's great for the children to look at the senior company and work with the older dancers that are in the company. It's really wonderful. And I remember I got very friendly, or the dancers in my time when I did party scene as a prince, because you had to have interaction with the guest. You go around and you introduce yourself and all. They were wonderful. They were wonderful. I remember I used to put my mother, in those days, I didn't have a hairspray, but my parents used to put Vaseline in my hair. Mm. So it would be and so I had one of the parents didn't like my Vaseline and said, listen, I want to get you some hairspray. Then the hairspray started.
When the guests at the party are speaking during the party, are they actually having conversation? Is it just pantomime? Not pantomime, but like,
I think they talk about what they have to do that day in the studio sometimes, or sometimes they interact about what's going on. Like they interact when the dolls are
so
dancing.
They interact as characters.
As characters.
Okay.
Some exaggerate it more than others, but they have to be as characters. Yeah, as characters and parents of these children, and be part of as Jerry Robbins would say, play the scene. Play what's going on.
What qualities do you think make a good prince for the Nutcracker?
Musical coordination, handsome, vulnerable, doesn't have to be a great dancer, just has a little bit of charisma. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't get it, but you hope you get it. And sometimes you have to have a self-assuredness and presence to you. And sometimes at that age, you don't even know you have it.
Yeah.
It usually comes in. As an adult or someone casting, you see it. You actually see it early on when they're in class too. You have a sense who it's going to be.
Has the pantomime evolved at all since you've been with the production?
No, it's exactly the same. Counts might be a little different at one place, but I could be wrong. My memory could be totally off, but it's exactly the same.
Do the kids know, the historical, how old the pantomime is, what the sort of legacy is that they're
I don't
part
know
of?
that. I don't know that because Dina Abigel, who rehearses the children who are chickens, I don't know if she actually explains that. Yeah, I don't know.
Because it is a pretty long and special legacy that they get to be a part of when they perform that pantomime. So after that pantomime scene in Act 2, then the Prince and Marie sit upstage on you guys call it a throne?
Yeah, throne.
On the throne, and then you're entertained by the inhabitants of the land of sweets. So you had a front row seat to some of the greatest dancers of the 20th century, really, for those 3 years that you were the prince. Which dancers made the biggest impression on you at that age?
Eddie Villella. Edward Villella. Jacques did, but not as much as Eddie Villella, because I think I related to him more because of my parents weren't very tall, so for some reason I just loved the whole thing about him. I remember at SAB when we were on 82nd Street, there used to be a late class at 5:30 to 7, and on Fridays it would be taught by Stanley Williams. And in those days, the company didn't rehearse much because they would rehearse like maybe 2 hours in the morning. You'd have to replace people or rehearse the ballet they were going to dance. But the cast never changed. So they didn't have all these rehearsals. So they would finish at 2 o'clock sometimes after company class. And the dancers would go to 82nd Street, take Stanley's class. There would be Jacques. Majority of the company. And then they would go to the theater, put their makeup on, do a couple of little warm up again, and go on stage. But I would watch those classes, and I would just idolize all of them. Because you couldn't watch them on what you can do now on a phone. You watched them and all the mystery of it all. Of people, the hearsay of people. It made it more. You wanted to gravitate to it because you were more curious.
Yeah.
Now you're not as curious because it's all out there.
Yeah, it's all out there.
It's all out there. When someone goes to the bathroom, or if they had red wine the night before.
Right.
No one really cares. But,
right.
But it was an incredible. I looked up to all those dancers. John Prince was another one I thought was amazing.
Were there any, I guess maybe young sugar plums or dewdrops that you ended up getting to dance with once you were in the company?
When I was, not Nutcracker part of their.
No.
Okay, Sally Leland.
Uh-huh.
I danced with her
Uh-huh.
when I first got in the company. Who else did I? And Carol Sumner I danced with. Patty McBride I danced with. Just trying to think. I danced opposite Suzanne Farrell in Four Seasons, but I danced opposite Peter, but dance with Sally Leland was the main one because of Robin's repertory.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we went through that one.
But I will say one thing, Balanchine was very smart with he liked to keep older dancers in the company a little longer because of these character roles. Mm-hmm. And Misha Urshansky, who was the original Drosselmeyer, when I got into the company, he ended up being the makeup artist. He was very close with Balanchine. And he was doing the grandfather when I was in the party scene at that time. So for Mr. B, when we did Don Q, because I'm an original Balanchine choreographed the puppet scene on Judy Fugate and I in Don Q, and she was 8, I was 10. There's that whole second act with the court dance and all a minuet they do, and he really wanted people to play those roles and be mature. And I wish in our company, some of those roles that are in our repertory should be danced by repertory directors / ballet masters, which they do at other companies. Mm-hmm. They use them for those kind of roles.
Right.
I think it adds sometimes because I was cast for the grandfather my first year in the company. Yeah. And Balanchine said no to whoever was doing the casting at the time, and said, no, he looks too young. Yeah. He needs to go. I right away went into the divertissement. I did the Soldier, which was danced those days by only soloist dancers. So I was, so Balanchine took an interest in me right away. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Susie Pilar said that she was the grandmother when she was 15, and that Mr. B said, you're too bouncy to be a grandmother.
Well, it's true, because even though they try to be old, you can tell their movement is young. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. Another role that Mr. B recreated from his memory was the candy cane. And when he performed it in Russia, he was celebrated for his speed. You also danced the candy cane. Could you share any other insight about that role, maybe that Balanchine would share when he coached or...
Well, I danced the role because first, and then Balanchine called a rehearsal with me and Danny Duell, I think it was. I'm positive it was. And he wanted to coach it. So
you had already performed it,
and then he wanted to explain what he wanted. Mm-hmm. Because when I was watching it, when I was a prince, and then when I first got into the company, because I didn't do candy cane until my second year of Nutcracker, I would watch it, and every candy cane would do it slightly different, which Balanchine allowed, because going through the hoop 12 times, everyone had their own little way of doing it. And the energy was different with each one, so he kind of explained what he wanted, and he was demonstrating unbelievably in it.
Did he jump through the hoop?
He did not jump through the hoop, but he explained he wanted it sideways, and you're stepping through. It's like really a circus trick. Uh-huh. You know, you're stepping through it. You're not jumping rope. So the way you have your hands with the hoop is like you're controlling the hoop. If you do it like this, it's like the hoop is controlling you. And it looks like I said before, it looks like you're jump roping. Mm-hmm. When it was like this, you're going through something, you're stepping through something. Mm-hmm. So he was very particular about that. He was particular about the diagonal step. You know, right before you go through the 12 hoops, what he wanted and how you would do this step, which is called a parasha, and then how you would jut out. And he wanted an attitude on demi-point. And then he explained about all the twist that hardly anybody can do. Mm. You know, at towards when you're going in front of the stage, downstage, across, before the 12 hoops. But he would, you can see him light up when he was teaching it. You saw it, his energy was different. And he and Jerry Robbins would dance around the room when they would coach. They would actually show, not so much by explaining, by demonstrating. You know, and that's what I find important to this day, because Jerry used to say, and even Balanchine, watch what I do. Watch what I do. And a lot of dancers don't do that as much. They don't really watch. They look at it, they go, okay, but they don't really watch. But not all. Some do. So I do the same. I say, watch what I do. So they can mimic it, and then after that they can find their way how to do something. It might be a little bit different, but if it has the same intent, it comes across.
So the Nutcracker has evolved over its 70-year history here at City Ballet. For example, the angels that appear in Act 2 are now danced by the youngest dancers in the production, but they used to be teenage students. Many of the changes occurred in 1964 when the company moved from City Center to the State Theater. There were new sets designed by Ruben Tarartunian, and it was to fit the larger stage. And of course, the Arabian divertissement was changed to feature a female soloist rather than a male dancer. And then also the Chinese tea dance has evolved to remove some stereotypical and derogatory gestures. Could you talk about what it's like to balance tradition with needing to adapt to, you know, current, whether it's different dancers' needs or sort of like the social environment of the times? How do you balance that?
That's a good question. It's hard because you're looking at it in many different ways. You're looking at it, the times we're living in. You're looking at society's change. Dancers have changed. They speak up more now. I find there's a responsibility also to make these works a live and have a life that is really important, and that's the directors' jobs of companies, or it's also with the ballet masters / repertory directors responsibility, because I find right now there's certain ballets in New York City Ballet repertory I'm afraid we are never going to see again in our stage, which I find very sad.
Yeah.
Because we are a repertory company, and you're not going to get, you can't cast pieces like you're going to cast a movie or a Broadway show. You have to do a compromise and find ways of making things work, even though it's might be not who you are, but you're playing a character, you're playing a role. But I find it's really important to look at the big picture. Also, because it's a living art form, things slowly evolve even when Balanchine was alive. Mm-hmm. If you look at Agon, it's not danced the way it was then and how it was danced when he was alive in the 80s. It evolved into something much bigger, but it also, the company changed. I'm not really answering your question, I know that.
Go ahead.
The company changed when they came to the Lincoln Center. If you ever danced at City Center, and then you go onto the stage at the time, New York State Theater, they never had that space. So they moved to bigger. The company danced differently. You had to devour space. Because if you look at Agon, that premiered at City Center, the stage is small, so you had to hold back your movements, because otherwise you'd be bumping into each other. But I remember doing a ballet with Balanchine, and he told me, "Dear, move, you're young, move, just devour space." But I think it depends on, I go to Europe a lot, and I just did a piece that has certain things in it that certain societies and certain certain countries, people get offended to these gestures in this piece. But then you go to another country, no one gets offended by it. So what I do is when I teach a piece, I say, listen, we can do it 3-4 ways. We can do it the original way, and it's how you do it. You know, you can't just do it to do it. You have to have a reason why you're doing these certain things. We can change it and do it a different way. Let's have a conversation. How do you feel? What feels comfortable to you? And I'll tell you if it feels right for the piece. And that's what I do. What I did also for Fancy Free, I took a couple of things out and I toned it down. Like I said in one of my interviews before, I want these pieces to live. I think the Nutcracker, the tea, which we used to call Chinese, but no, we don't do that anymore.
Oh, so I didn't even notice that.
They call it tea. They call it tea. If you look at the costumes, they look Asian. All they did was take out this.
The fingers.
The fingers. It's the same from the waist
down.
down.
And the costume changed a little because didn't there used to be
right,
the wig
they took the wigs
mustache.
off. The mustache came off. The I don't know, the straw hat.
Yeah.
Even though it's not straw, came out, came off, and the ladies' wigs came off.
Oh, I forgot the ladies had wigs too.
They're black.
So that was more of a costuming change than choreography.
Choreographically, it's the same, except the fingers are taken off. And that's basically it. And I sometimes think maybe we should just re-choreograph it totally. I don't know if that's correct or not.
Yeah.
Some people have suggested maybe we need to rethink that dance.
Yeah.
And then the finale changed too, because they used to do point with fingers.
Oh yeah.
And now that's taken out.
Oh, isn't it kind of like an open palm gesture?
It's more, you, Suchanu. But it used to be point, fast little things, jump up like this. That's all out.
So that is changed.
That's changed.
Yeah.
And then all this ari-dum, bum, 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 when they do the attitude before this jump, that used to be fingers.
Okay.
So all the fingers have been taken out.
Yeah.
So I get it. I think you have to be very conscious of nowadays you have to be conscious to not offend somebody. You are going to offend people. You have no control over that. But you just have to be aware of the times you're living in. That's what I feel. I think Robbins would have, and Balanchine, I think, would have changed things. I think they would have.
Yeah. I don't want to pick up those voices out there. What are some other maybe more subtle changes that people might not have noticed that have taken place? I heard that there used to be more people in the party scene, or like teenagers or something.
Well, that was Peter.
Okay.
Peter created that for the movie.
Oh, so that was just
they added, and then he kept it. He wanted to keep it. I staged the first act Nutcracker, and I staged it the way it's done now, without all those teenagers and extra people, which is better. You see more what's going on in the party scene. You see the parents calling their children for the presents more clearly. So it's less busy. That's a change, but that's a change Peter did. He added that. Costume-wise, nothing's changed. You know, as they say, if it's not broken, why fix it?
Yeah.
You know, it's still selling out. We're now doing it with the original backdrop in the second act. When we came to the theater, I think the company couldn't afford what we have in the backdrop of the second act. It was like a drop that, I can't remember. You can see it in old photos.
Yeah.
It was a different backdrop.
Yeah.
because it was less expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Balanchine would change things because of the times. I know.
Yeah.
Has to move. Has to live. Otherwise, the dancers won't have opportunities to do some ballets that are so really amazing.
Mm-hmm.
My opinion.
Yeah. As a senior repertory director, what is your role now in preparing the Nutcracker each year?
I rehearse. I have quite a few couples for the pas de deux, second act. I do all the male divertissements except for Spanish. Dina asked me to look at the Prince occasionally. And that's it, really. I used to do the mice, but I don't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell you a funny story about the mice.
Please tell me.
Because many years ago, which hopefully not any corps de ballet, a male would hear this, but we used to do New Year's Eve. Everyone used to change choreography, and Balanchine loved it. You know, it was all a tradition.
Mm-hmm.
People would buy tickets that knew about this.
Yeah.
And knew about the company would buy you. So while one season I was a mouse. I was the first mouse to get shot in the bum.
Mm-hmm.
He comes out and there's a soldier goes on, boom, goes around, he goes like this.
Mm-hmm.
I decided to do Dying Swan. I had a pair of pointe shoes on. I came out doing Dying Swan. Rosemary Dunleavy, who was the head repertory director and still is, was so upset.
Really?
She was so upset. So upset, but everyone was howling.
Uh-huh.
I was on point, beret with my gray point shoes.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mr. B thought it was funny? Or was this later?
No, he thought it was funny.
Okay.
But I made sure I didn't do it the next year.
Uh-huh.
Actually, I don't think I was doing mice anymore. But it's very different too, because I shared tea and candy cane during Nutcracker, plus the soldier. So when I was very young, we didn't have very many alternates. So some performances I would have soldier, kept the makeup on, put my mouse head on, I should say, did mice, went back to my dressing room, take off the soldier, put the Chinese makeup on, tea makeup on. At that time, we had the Fu Manchu, the whole thing. Go out there, stone cold by the time you sat in your dressing room. So we would do, that would go on, and the next night I would have candy cane. The next night I would go back to tea. Then I would have soldier. Now it's so many people, which is great. They get opportunities, but in those days we didn't have as many people getting those kind of opportunities. So when people complain, oh, it's too much for them to do this and this, I go, really? Really? Okay. I mean, it's fine.
Yeah.
When
did that New Year's Eve tradition end with the pranks?
I think it stopped basically a couple of years after Peter took over the company. I think the stage managers started to make speeches saying, please do not change the choreography. Or it could have been the Balanchine Trust. Right. But I think it was basically Peter stopping it.
I love hearing those stories. Do you have a favorite part of the process now? Rehearsals or seeing a certain part of performances?
My favorite part is to watch the dancers succeed. I don't have any particular part. I like teaching these divertissements because it's, again, my history of being in the company when Balanchine was alive. I like when the dancer succeeds, and in succeeding and in the development process of teaching these ballets, that their confidence grows. I think confidence is half the battle in dance. There's, yes, technique too, but to have that technique and to succeed on that stage at that moment, you need to have confidence, and know you can do it.
What does it mean to you to have been involved in this production for so long?
It's special. Do I think about it? I think about it sometimes, but I don't really. I think about being one of the most senior dancers not dancers anymore, but senior person in the company from when this theater, Lincoln Center, was created. I think about it. I think about going from Balanchine, Robbins, Peter, and now our current directorship. I see a big difference. I see how we worked then, how we work now. Not that anything is vastly different, but at the same time, it's not so different. But you cannot work the way we worked in the 60s. Mm. As we were saying, times have changed. People have changed. People are not people that go, yes, a lot of people were afraid to talk in my time. They just did what they were told, which is, at that time, that's what you did. But I think as time moved on, I think people started to speak up more. And I actually like when dancers speak up, because then you know what you're dealing with, and you get to know the dancer and what is their, where can you really reach them artistically to get something out of them. If you have a dancer that just dances or does everything you tell them to do, it's not interesting. Mm. I mean, Jerry used to say to a dancer, can't you come in here with some ideas? I mean, can't you just come in? I'll tell you if the ideas are wrong, but come in with something, you know? So being in the to me is special. And to be in the same organization for so many years is special. But I'm very fortunate to be able to travel outside the company to get to see what's good about New York City Ballet and what could be better. Mm-hmm. And that's like that in all companies. Yeah. You know, it's not going to be perfect. Mm-hmm. Nothing's perfect in life. It's like a marriage. You accept some of it for what it is, and you deal with it. And for me, I care about how those dancers develop. I'm very much into developing dancers. I think that's something that's really important, to not put them in a position to not succeed. Sometimes if you push a dancer a little too early and they get too much at a very young age, it's too much pressure. So you have to find ways. If you have a certain role you want them to dance, in the future, you have to give them different ballets to dance before that. That huge part that you are interested for them to do. That is something that has a lot of thought process, and I try to instill that in my work. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, but that's what I try to instill, you know, and to teach them something. Not that I'm saying I'm the teacher, I'm going to teach you something, listen to me. Just so they have a file cabinet back there that they can reference to. Mm-hmm. And that's by handing it down. Yeah. You don't do that by watching a video of a ballet. Mm-hmm. It's by handing it down. Yeah.
I've got two last questions for you. So I posted on Instagram that I was going to be interviewing you, and I asked people what they wanted to know from you about
I didn't even know
Nutcracker.
This.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah, I just posted it yesterday.
Oh, I didn't see it.
And there were two questions that came up multiple times that people wanted to hear. So they wanted to know about your Sugar Plum fairies that you've danced with, and what was something different or unique about working with some of them, or if you had a special partnership.
Well, the special partnership I had was Susan Gluck, who was she was small because I was small. And she was very easy to partner. We had a great relationship. We danced interplay together. We danced many other ballets. And I was older, but we were still the same generation.
Mm-hmm.
I think she became part of the company when Christopher D'Amboise came in. But that's my main memory, is dancing with her, and how we didn't overanalyze things. Sally Leland was our ballet mistress, repertory director on it. But that was any particular memory. I just remember my dancing was better than my partnering. You know, I was very strong,
mm-hmm.
but I didn't have really the natural sensitivity in my fingers. Because certain dancers might not be physically strong, but they're really good partners because it's about timing
mm-hmm.
and just a sense of where the girl is when they're on point is sometimes you can teach that, because Peter Barnes was very good at that. He really was very into teaching the gentleman how to partner, and you can see that in the way, when he was director, the way the ladies were partnered. Mm-hmm. You saw it, and he showed incredibly well. He had these big hands, but that was something really important to Balanchine also, is because to him the woman was this creature, and the man was always the supporter of that creature, you know. And if you watch, I saw an old video, the movie of the dream scene in Don Q. Conrad Lullo was partnering Suzanne, and I've never seen anything so smooth in my life. He would lift her, but it looked like she was jumping on her own. The timing of the landing and the off balance, how smooth the transitions were. But you know, some of it is fresh and some of it's not anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's like certain people come up to me and say, "Hi, do you remember me?" And I'm very nice, but I don't sometimes. I think it happens to everybody.
Yeah, of course.
It happens to everybody. But sometimes, you know, you meet so many people and you teach. I teach so many people, but if they say their name, it all clicks. But my memory basically is always looking forward to Nutcracker. Always. It's because of my childhood and seeing it at City Center. It just says to me, it's special to be able to pass on, you know, these things, to a new generation. You know, it's special. We don't realize because Jerry Robbins said this to me. Your parents must be, you first said to me, your parents must be really proud of you. We were, I think, in Paris. I was staging one of his pieces with him. And I thought about that for a while. And then a couple of weeks later, we were in our studios across the street at the Juilliard building, the Rose building. And this is while he was choreographing Suite of Dances with Verznikov. And Jerry and Verznikov would be at 9 o'clock in the studio before New York City Ballet would start their classes. And they were talking, Verznikov and Jerry were talking about some review of some critic writing something. And Jerry said, you know, we do what we do. We don't worry about what the other people think or what the outside world. They might like it, they might not. And I thought about that, and I said, you know, what we do is really special. And you can't really take it for granted, and to be in the theater world and to be part of making people laugh, giving people enjoyment, having people leave the theater maybe change their lives and maybe not. I don't know. But I think it's something that you can't take for granted. But back to what I was saying, when you're in it, you don't see what the outside sees, because this is what you do.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that we do, and
it's just a normal. You
to
wake
me,
up,
it's
you
normal.
go teach class, you have a rehearsal, and that's your day. You go home and eat dinner.
I just came back from Milan, working with the La Scala. I did my job, and it was great process. The dancers were incredible. I know the director. I taught him ballets at the Paris Opera. A lot of directors I meet now or I work with, I know.
Right.
So it's a long, long history. But yeah, we don't. It's not about. I think the word power and ego. I mean, we all have an ego, but I said this just Peter actually. After Robbins passed away, he called me in his office and we were talking, and I said about being a director. Is it about having the position of being a director, or is it really about being a director? You know, some people want the power, but don't really understand the development of dancers and how you have to think about other things. I mean, they eventually have to, but initially, why do you want to be a director? Why would someone want to be a director? Is it because they have something to offer? Or is it you want the power? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's, do you really like ballet? Or do you want that power, that title? But do you really like coming to the theater every night to see a ballet or see your dancers dance? Balanchine did.
Yeah.
He was in that first wing. Every performance of Nutcracker, every performance of the concert, he was in that first wing.
Except for the one time that he was on stage, right? In the concert?
Yes. Joe Robbins'
another
concert.
story.
Yeah,
another story.
story.
All right, the last question. People want to know, if you could have danced any female role in the Nutcracker, which one would you have liked to do?
Any female role in the Nutcracker? Oh, I never thought about that.
I've thought I would want to learn Candy Cane. It just looks so fun.
You know, the Harlequin in La Sonnambula was also danced by a woman many years ago, I was told.
Oh, really?
I never saw it.
Yeah.
That was, I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that. Any female role I would like to dance? Probably if it fit anything, it would be Dewdrop.
Yeah.
It would not be Marzipan. It looks too hard.
Yeah.
I mean, Dewdrop's hard too, but it's different. Marzipan's
yeah.
really hard. Really, really hard.
I agree.
Yeah.
I thought that you might say Dewdrop.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Because it's athletic. It's feminine. It's people forget it's a dewdrop. Sometimes big, tall dewdrops come out, but they could be a big dewdrop. You know, it's a dewdrop. It's delicate.
Yeah.
Sometimes people punch it too much. And you still have to perform, be present, but I mean, he created on Tanaki Leclerc, so to him that was very feminine.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all of your Nutcracker memories and stories and reminiscences with us. I know that I've enjoyed hearing bits and pieces of them over the years, so I'm glad that I could sit and kind of hear them all at once, and now we can share them with more people who I know are excited to listen.
Thank you.
The Immortal Icons of Dance podcast is written, produced, and edited by me, Lauren Johnson. Our music is written by Shelby Rassler of Jenkins & Rassler. Technical support is generously provided by Libby Lessenhop.